What was Amazon originally called?
How does IKEA choose its product names?
And what language is Häagen-Dazs?
We'll look at the logic behind Lego, the notions behind Nike, the pep in Pepsi, and the transatlantic Milky Way mix-up as we explore brand names on this episode of Words Unravelled.
Welcome to another Words Unravelled. I'm Rob Watts from the YouTube channel Rob Words.
And I'm Jess Ferris, author of etymology books, including Useless Etymology. And welcome to our trademarked episode of Words Unravelled.
Yes, we're going to keep it very brand aware during this episode as we trace the origins of the names of famous brands.
This is a really nice one, I think, because usually we have a good explanation for how the name came to be. Sometimes there are false origins and things like that, but usually these are within the last 200 to 400 years at the very oldest. So we know and how we have written records of the people who named these brands.
Just as an aside, something that I found really interesting while I was doing this research was how often I had to go into archived versions of brands' websites to find out where their name came from. A lot of them seem to want to expunge from the record how they came up with their names, or they just no longer think it's important to tell people why they came up with these names, particularly if if it's rooted in something that's not been so pleasant over the last couple of hundred years. But where do we start then? Because we can cover the whole world here, but let's start with some really big brands.
I would love to start with IKEA, as a matter of fact, because this is fun. Yeah. And it's got some silliness to it, but not necessarily. It's also very creative. It's some of my favorite branding because the way they describe the furniture items themselves also have a fun system to it. It's not just like SKUs, right?
Well, tell us about that then. So firstly, where does IKEA come from as a name?
This is an example of what I'm going to call, for the purposes of this episode, a portmanteacronym, which is well, this is more of an acronym than some of the other examples we'll bring up, but it is short for Ingvar Kamprad, the founder and of the organization, Elmtarid, which is the family farm where he was born, and Agunnaryd, which is his hometown in Småland in South Sweden.
We're not regretting starting with a Swedish one at all.
I have walked into this and I am going to forge ahead despite my very limited knowledge of the Swedish language. But the product names are fun because Ingvar was dyslexic and he thought giving them 1 to 2 word names, which are usually proper names after Scandinavian places, was easier to remember than a product code. But of course they have those too, right? But there's a system to it. So sofas and coffee tables are usually named after places in Sweden, textiles after Denmark, beds after Norway, lamps after seas and lakes, outdoor furniture after islands.
Are you kidding? I had no idea that was the case.
No, it's a whole thing. There is deviation, but there was this really fun Swedish tourism campaign back in 2021 that showed the IKEA product next to the location it's named after, and it ended up being funny because they showed like the toilet brush named after the beautiful Lake Bolmen. And then one of my other favorite things here is they've had to discontinue a few in English-speaking countries because they don't translate well or they don't sound right. For example, the plant spray called Fukta, which meant to moisten.
Oh, it's doubly awful.
Right. And then they had a workbench called Fartful, which means speedy.
So if you... something that you sit on. No, you don't sit on a workbench, do you? You stand at a workbench. It'd be even worse if it was something you sat on that was also fartful.
Right. And then they have a computer desk called Jerker, which is jerker in English. And then Lickum, which means happy home.
It means happy home.
It looks like it's Lichem, but it looks like Lickhim.
They're all like legit words then, or are they distorted versions of these words? They're not. They're just like...
No, they just don't sound right in English.
So what is Billy? Is Billy a place? The famous bookcase?
It is named after IKEA advertising manager Billy Liljedahl.
Oh, okay.
because he said he wanted a proper bookcase just for books. So that's an exception.
Oh, nice. Okay, I somehow managed to find the exception there.
You did.
I didn't think Billy sounded like a place in Sweden.
I like how you just know IKEA product names off the top of your head, though.
I don't know many more than that. I don't even know my bookshelves.
By the way, for fans of horror fiction, there is a hilarious book called Horror Store by Grady Hendrix that is about a haunted IKEA type store.
Take the recommendation. I'm not going to ask anymore. So while we're in Scandinavia, let's go on to another of the big Scandinavian brands, like the really big ones, particularly nowadays. Lego. This is also, what is it that we're calling them? Portmanteacronyms. Insofar as it's taking the first two letters of two words, right?
Yes.
Which is Ligot, the Danish for play well.
In fact, one of my spouse's first jobs was teaching physics classes to kids with Legos, and they called it Playwell Technologies.
Oh, that's clever. Very good, very good. I mean, I don't know how much more there is to say about it other than that is what it means. But
it was started by a Danish carpenter named Ole Kirk Christensen, and he didn't know this at the time, but in Latin, Lego means I read, but it can also be used in a lot of other ways in Latin. So it can also serendipitously be interpreted to mean I assemble or I collect, which is appropriate. The trouble is the name was given to the company in 1934, but they didn't start making bricks until the late 1940s. And the first version of Legos were called automatic binding bricks. And they were competing with Kitty Craft brand self-locking bricks that were invented in the 1930s.
What the heck was Lego doing for the 10 years before it invented the brick? Is what I want to know.
Other types of toys, really. And mostly wooden ones. In fact, at the time, this was the advent of plastic toys. There was a lot of public pushback against plastic toys because they were seen as cheaper or more breakable often because of lower grade plastics.
Yeah, they were more brittle, yeah.
We've had a retroactive recapturing of the joy of wooden toys lately too.
There is a transatlantic difference in how we handle the word Lego, between America and the UK.
Because of the way we pluralize or don't pluralize it.
Yeah, exactly. In America, you treat each brick as a Lego, right? And so if you're playing Lego, as we would say, you're playing with Legos.
Wait, so if you step on one, what do you call it?
I stepped on a Lego brick.
A Lego brick. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
And there you go. Yeah, not on a Lego. Although I see how that is more convenient.
They are more sticklery, pedantic about that on the competition shows, like the Lego Brick Masters and things like that. They talk about bricks instead of Legos.
Oh, okay. Okay,
they preserve the brand
if you want to say brand aligned, then actually the way we're doing it in Europe, where we could say I am playing Lego, is how they want you to do it. That's interesting. Well, we're on a Danish brand. Let's briefly mention a brand that wants you to think it's Danish, but isn't. Häagen-Dazs.
I think I had heard that, but that's funny. What does it mean? Anything?
It means absolutely nothing at all. It was started. I had no idea. It started in the Bronx.
That tracks.
A couple called Ruben and Rose Matus in 1959 established an ice cream company. They didn't find it was working very well, and decided that the reason, for some reason, was the name. And Ruben actually told a magazine, the number one thing for us was to get a foreign sounding name. And they were just attracted to the way that Danish looked. And he said, Haagen-Dazs doesn't mean anything, but it would attract attention, especially with the umlaut. Because, you've got that double A and an umlaut on the first A. I don't even think, someone can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I don't think Danish does that. But no, Häagen-Dazs has it. And it's just this sort of luscious sound, but there's nothing remotely Danish about it, and the words don't mean anything in Danish.
If I look at those words, I don't immediately think Danish, aside from the association with the ice cream.
But you think of Europe. I think of maybe it could be Swiss or Belgium. I think of places where they're probably making nice chocolate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of idea they're trying to evoke.
That makes sense. And Danish is in New York, are also a dessert. I don't know.
Oh, well, yeah, there you go. But no, it is from New York. What's Häagen-Dazs? No, that was what was that? That was more Bostonian. I'm not very good at it. Not very good at the accents. I'd be very happy to get into some more of these portmanteacronyms, or just, is this a term that we're using for brand names that are basically made up of elements of words?
Basically.
Because that is a massive thing here in Germany, by the way.
Oh, I'm sure.
Like, if someone doesn't know how to come up with a name for their brand, here in Germany, they do one of three things. They put 24 after it, if it's like, particularly if it's an internet brand, to suggest it's available all of the time. Weirdly, there's loads of brands here that have just got 24 at the end of them. Legacies from the 90s have got that. They put und mehr at the end of it, which means and more. So say like, I don't know, Schokoladen und mehr. Or they take the first syllable of each of the words that make up the long name and they smoosh them together.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah,
yeah. Brand names could get quite long in German,
it's a very good way of making something that looks like a name. I mean, I suppose the most obvious one of these out of Germany is Adidas. Although Adi is not, it's not the first syllable exactly. It's one
his nickname.
One and a bit syllables. Yeah, so this is Adolf Dassler, who is a carpenter and had a shoe business with his brother Rudolf, right from just after the First World War through to the end of the Second World War. And these guys were Nazis, by the way. They got very quickly on the Nazi bandwagon. But it did put a lot of pressure on them and they fell out. And also for family reasons, not just for political reasons, but they fell out. And in the wake of the war, they split off and formed two different sportswear companies, and Adolf and Rudolf, or Adi and Rudolf, gave their employees the option to pick which of them they worked for. And a load of them went off with Rudolf, but even more of them stayed with Adi. And the company he started, he wanted to call Adidas, but there was already a children's footwear firm called that. So he called it Adidas, from Adi Dassler. But tell us what happens with Rudolph's company, Jess.
So he founded his own similarly named organization called Ruda, like Rudolf Dassler. But later,
it's exactly the same system.
It is interesting that the name he chose has it has the same vowels and the same number of syllables and the same number of letters, but it is an animal. It is the puma.
Yeah. I could not work out why he changed it from Ruda to Puma, although I do know that an early logo for Ruda had a puma on it, so maybe that's why.
It's got to be just because it's a fast animal and maybe more internationally recognizable and pronounceable.
Yeah, it's true. And you got those neat two syllables, and like you say, the vowel sounds are the same. You have Aldi in the States?
Yeah.
You do. So there's a very similar story going on with Aldi. I don't know if you're about this.
Oh, I don't know this one.
For a start, the name is formed in exactly the same way as Adidas and Ruda were. It's Albrecht Discounts, right? Aldi. But also there's a brotherly rivalry going on here as well.
Lots of this.
Well, so the brothers, again, they fell out and set off to start separate businesses, but they both wanted to call them Aldi. So in Germany, to this day, you have two Aldis. You have Aldi Nord, Aldi North, which is what we have here in Berlin, and Aldi Süd, which is Aldi South, which is what you have in southern Germany. But also Aldi Süd is the one that you have in the States and we have in Britain as well. And they're generally, I think, better at like sourcing home comforts like Cadbury's chocolate and stuff for me. But yeah, another brotherly thing. But this whole thing of taking the first syllable of each word is a massive thing, particularly in supermarkets. So there's another supermarket chain in Germany called Rewe or Rewe. Sometimes it gets called Rewe. And that is REWE. And it is short for Revisionsverband der Westkaufgenossenschaften.
Good choice.
They were right to shorten it, weren't they? Which means Auditing Association of Western Buying Cooperatives.
Oh, good.
Yeah, now it's called Rewe. There's another one just at the end of my street here called Edeka, right? Edeka. EKA, which is short for Einkaufsgenossenschaft der Kolonialwarenhändler, which is a purchasing cooperative of colonial goods retailers. Although it's slightly different because EDK, which is what they're called, EDEKA, is phonetically the same as the letters EDK in German, EDK. Right. So it's actually the initials rather than the syllables. But also here in Berlin, like the most famous department store is called KaDeWe, which is Kaufhaus des Westens. This is just a really big way of naming things in Germany.
Also convenient, and it means you can keep your like stupid corporate name, the like extensive one, while also making it consumer friendly.
But it also requires absolutely zero imagination or creativity, none whatsoever. Because even when you take into account that you're going to use this huge long word and you're going to reduce it to something that sounds snappy, you're still hemmed into what you can reduce it to by the elements that are there. Like you could get 1,000 people and it'd all come up with exactly the same name from the original. So I find it quite annoying. And I was thinking, this is such a German, uncreative thing to do. And then I was looking at, hold on, what's Asda, one of the big supermarket chains in Britain? Associated Dairies. So it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure we have much of a leg to stand on there. Though there are some very creative, I think, American and British brand names out there. I think Nike is one. Originally, the organization founded by Bill Bowerman and Phil Knight was called Blue Ribbon Sports, and they were distributors of the running shoe that is now called Asics, which is actually my preferred brand of running shoe for street running and marathons and whatnot. Asics is an acronym for the Latin phrase animus sana in corpore sano, which means a sound mind in a sound body. Bowerman wanted to design his own shoes, and one of their administrators said it should be the brand name should be 2 syllables maximum and have an exotic sounding letter like a Z or an X or a K, which okay. So Jeff Johnson was a runner and he was one of the first employees at Blue Ribbon. He pitched the name Nike, the winged goddess of victory, and said the idea came to him in a dream. The name was chosen, but some people pushed back on it because none of the initial buyers could pronounce it correctly.
I grew up calling it Nike.
Did you?
Yeah, absolutely. No, everyone called it Nike where I was from.
Wow,
no way. Turned up at my school and called it Nike. Ooh, Nike.
I mean,
Nike, mate.
In Latin, it would really be like Nike, right? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right.
The thing that made Nike as big as it is their sports partnerships with athletes and things, but also Wieden and Kennedy, which is the ad agency that is best known for the swoosh and the Just Do It. Speaking of which, the swoosh was designed by Carolyn Davidson, who was a grad student in Phil Knight's accounting class at Portland State University, and she charged $2 an hour and submitted a bill for 17 and a half hours. So she made $35 on the Nike swoosh initially, but eventually they gave her some Nike shares. I've seen reports of 500. I've seen reports of 1,000 that are now worth like 3 million.
Eventually they gave her some Nike shoes. Because $37 isn't going to get you any.
Depending on the shoe, they could be worth quite a lot from that era. But anyway, the Just Do It tagline also has a horrifying origin. Dan Wieden of Wieden and Kennedy, which, like I said, has long worked with Nike, said that it was inspired by the final words of death row inmate Gary Gilmore, who was facing execution, and said, you know what, let's do it. And he said, I remember when I read that, I was like, that's amazing. I mean, how in the face of that much uncertainty do you push through that? So I didn't like the let's thing, so I just changed that. Otherwise, I'd have to give him credit, which I just like, there's so many layers of oh dear there.
Okay. So many layers of oh dear. Yeah. Presumably it was on death row for something quite bad.
I forgot to look that part up.
It will have been bad.
I'm sure.
How interesting. I know you've got more sports brands and we'll get onto those in a second, but I just want to take a brief sidestep because you were saying about how they wanted something with like a K or an X or a Z in it to give sort of what people would describe now as something sort of vibesy. And I was surprised to find that came up in a couple of the ones that I was looking up. One of them just being, Rolex. There's no real logic behind that name other than how it feels. I mean, they used to trade. So it's a German guy called Hans Wilsdorf and a British guy called Alfred Davis set up the company. And their first watches had like W and D written on them, or Wilsdorf and Davis written on them. But Hans Wilsdorf said that he wanted his watches to bear a name that was short, easy to say, and remember in any language, and which looked good on watch movements and dials. So like nothing more than that, nothing more than it being sort of easy to say and looking good. He said, I tried combining the letters of the alphabet in every possible way. This gave me some 100 names, but none of them felt quite right. One morning, while driving on the upper deck of a horse-drawn omnibus along Cheapside in the city of London, he says, a genie whispered Rolex in my ear. And that's where the name came from.
A genie.
It's a genie. Yeah, of course it was a genie.
A genie.
How many more of these has come from a genie?
From a genie.
Yeah, but the other one is just based on sort of vibes and how it sounds. Is Exxon, as in ExxonMobil. Exxon, obviously they were called Esso from literally the initials SO, Standard Oil.
Yeah.
It was Standard Oil New Jersey, but there were lots of Standard Oils in lots of different states. And that was permanently a problem when they were trying to be a national brand, because every time they moved into a new territory, the local Standard Oil would be like, oh, hold on, people know us as SO as well. So you can't be calling yourselves Esso, E-S-S-O. Even though actually in Britain it's still called Esso, so internationally it's still called Esso. But the Exxon from ExxonMobil basically came out of a computer. Whatever the sort of, I think it's the 60s or 70s. I'd have to double check that. But whatever the, 1972, whatever the 1972 equivalent of putting it in chat GPT even would have been, is what they did. They asked a computer to just spit out something that sounded inspired by Esso, but was really just a collection of charismatic letters. So you've got that double X in there to reflect the double S. That's where it comes from anyway. And to be honest, like for an oil company, it's perfectly spiritless, isn't it? It's perfectly soulless. That's where
100%.
Exxon comes from. But Exxon, was chosen to replace Esso, Enco, and Humble. Those are all brands that I gather Americans will remember of a certain age. They're replaced by Exxon.
What other oil and gas companies do you have?
Oh, I have one other. Shell. What do you think would be the most obvious possible reason for the company to have been called Shell?
Literally that it's a shell company.
It's not. It's that they used to sell shells.
What?
Shell, before they sold petroleum, gasoline,
what?
They sold shells. huge amounts of shells. From their website, I think this is again one of those archived ones. The origin of the Shell name can be traced back to the seashells that Marcus Samuel Sr. imported from the Far East during the late 19th century. When his sons Marcus Jr. and Samuel were looking for a name for the kerosene that they were exporting to Asia, they chose Shell. Quick note here. So Marcus Samuel Sr. had two kids who he called Marcus and Samuel. I love that.
Very nice.
Shell is named after shells.
Yeah.
They,
wait, hang on.
Merged with Royal Dutch.
So they were also selling kerosene.
No, they were later selling kerosene.
Later selling. Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of an homage to their dad's business.
It is interesting that's, presumably shells are part of what goes into fossil fuel, right? Like,
sure, surely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? Right? No, people aren't, until they come to research a podcast about it, people aren't generally asking, why is Shell called Shell? Because they're probably making an assumption along the lines of, bottom of the ocean shells.
She sells seashells and then creates oil rigs.
Marcus Samuel sold seashells, then his son sold Shell oil.
While we're on the subject of gigantic companies, we should probably do Amazon and Google, right?
Yeah, okay. So Amazon, giant company, really giant river.
Yes, that is 100% the idea. But do you know what it was
is it
originally?
Really?
Yeah. Do you know what it was originally called?
So this is Mr. Bezos's like first name for the company, is it? No, I have no idea.
Cadabra. And he changed it, short for abracadabra, and he changed it because people misheard it as cadaver.
Yeah, good move, Jeff. I think he might be quite a smart fella. I don't know. But how could he? I mean, Amazon, that makes sense now that it is, a $1 trillion company, that it would be named after a massive river. But what hubris to name a bookseller Amazon for those reasons. Are we sure that is why it is, that he just thought it was going to be big?
2 reasons. He wanted a name beginning with the letter A, so the company would appear near the top of alphabetical listings in early web directories. And B, he did intend from its earlier stages to make it the everything store. The arrow in the logo, right, is
points
suggesting
from
A to Z. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, what was the other one that you mentioned as well as Amazon? Google.
It had a worse name too, eventually, or originally. It was founded in 1998 by Larry Page and Sergey Brin, and they originally nicknamed the new search engine Backrub.
No, they didn't.
Yes, because
Backrub.
It checked backlinks to estimate how important a site was, like how many backlinks a site has, which is still critical to SEO, right?
Yeah. I don't like it.
Anyway, they changed the name to Google. They choose Google, which is an intentional misspelling of Google, which we discussed on our math episode. It's the mathematical term for the number 1 followed by 100 zeros, and it was coined by a 9-year-old who was the nephew of a mathematician, which is cute. And the logic was that Google is an unimaginably large quantity, and they wanted a name that suggested organizing a vast amount of information.
It's amazing how these brands started out with visions of being so massive.
You know what else is cool about this is the word Google, as it is spelled in that brand name, also predates the search engine, but isn't related to it, and it is always silly. For example, the comic strip Barney Google and Snuffy Smith was created in 1919, and it was originally a sports page humor strip about Barney Google, who was a small cigar-chomping gambler who was obsessed with horse racing and prize fights, and his famously underperforming racehorse Sparkplug. But eventually Snuffy Smith, the Appalachian backwoods fellow, became the main character of his own comic because he was a fan favorite. And then British children's author Enid Blyton used the phrase Google Bun as the name of a fantastical food item in her books about a gigantic magical tree and all of its fantastical inhabitants. She said the Google Buns were most peculiar. They each had a large currant in the middle, and this was filled with sherbet. So when you got to the currant and bit the sherbet, it frothed out and filled your mouth with fine bubbles that tasted delicious.
That sounds delightful. And I guess like the concept of googly eyes, like the things that you might stick onto
right?
Like a child's drawing to give them sort of goggly eyes. They definitely get called googly eyes, right? Which implies the existence of a word to Google. Right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, this is a whole thing. So there have been a bunch of like lawsuits over genericization of the term Google, the verb Google. It is in the dictionary as a verb now. It means to use the Google search engine to obtain information on the internet, but also means that's what it originally meant. Now it just means to obtain things on the internet, because do you know what the number 1 search term on the search engine Bing is?
Is it Google?
It's Google.
I just think it's the only thing I've ever searched Bing for is Google.
Yes.
Why am I not on Google?
Do you know what the first pop culture use of Google as a verb was?
That's a very specific question, but hold on. Maybe
I mean, like, what TV show was it on?
Simpsons.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
That's going to be one of them.
That's a good trivia question.
What was the context?
They just used the verb Google as a verb, and that was the first time that ever happened.
Oh yeah, fine.
I don't remember which character said it, but some lawsuits have tried to say that the Google trademark has died because it has become a transitive verb, meaning to search something on the internet, and this is typically so that other IP can use Google as a verb. Yeah,
it's tricky. That's a hard one to argue, I'd have thought.
Do you know what the number 2 search engine besides Google is?
Is it DuckDuckGo?
No, it's YouTube.
Oh, what? So that's Google anyway.
Still Google. And then after that,
So wait, what are we defining as a search engine here? Just a thing that people type a question into it? And
it's the number one place they go for search queries of any kind on the internet. So people are using YouTube as their primary search engine or their secondary search engine after Google. And for a particular category, it was a couple years ago. I don't think this is true anymore because it's kind of cultural value share has dropped recently. But TikTok was also the number 3 search engine for Gen Zers a few years ago.
So if they had a query, they would type it in there and hope that a relevant video came up rather than another format.
This explains a lot. Should we open a Coke? Right? Exactly.
Yeah. Although, actually, Coke can only refer to Coca-Cola, right? Although, I mean, again, genericized.
Well, you have opened up a can of worms here.
I have opened up a can of Coke. Yeah. Coca-Cola is the original cola, as in the original drink, fizzy brown drink called cola. The original cola is the cola nut, which is the ingredient that separates Coca-Cola from the Coca wine that is being drunk before Coca-Cola comes along, right?
Yes, and coca leaves are the first part of Coca-Cola, which the first 2 ingredients were cocaine and caffeine.
Yeah, indeed. So Coca-Cola is also very stimulating because the cola nut is enjoyed in West Africa and is still to this day chewed for its invigorating benefits. And I think everyone knows this, but Coca-Cola is originally marketed as a health tonic of sorts. The first place to sell it is a pharmacy. A guy called Dr. John Pemberton in 1886 took his syrup that he'd made as an alternative, an alcohol-free alternative to coca wine.
It was embraced by the temperance movement too, which is very funny.
yeah, absolutely. To a pharmacy in Atlanta, Georgia, right, where it was combined. So it's sold as a syrup, right? I don't know if everyone knows this about Coca-Cola, but even if you buy it in a bar and it's not come in a bottle, the bar has bought it as a syrup, right? And it's mixing it with carbonated water as it serves it to you. That's what that is doing. It is mixing soda with the syrup that's downstairs usually or somewhere else in a big box.
That was the big thing with like soda fountains in early Americana, is like you would go, and if you were a teen or a wholesome person who didn't do any of that alcohol stuff, then you would go to the soda fountain and get your sodas made.
Precisely. And so they put this Coca-Cola on sale, and according to the company itself, they say demand was modest. Sales in the first year averaged 9 servings a day. But now Coca-Cola is, of course, the best-selling soft drink in the world.
To your point, whether Coke is generic or not, you mentioned that this happened in the South, and in the South, you can, if you ask for a Coke, you might be asked what kind, and someone might bring you a Pepsi because Coke means soda, basically.
Ah, that's interesting. So I worked in a pub in England where whenever someone asked for a Coke, we would have to inform them that what we actually had on tap was Pepsi. Every time. Pepsi, okay. And the answer was yes, 99.5% of the time. But there's like 1 in 200 people who'd say, oh no.
One of my favorite ad campaigns is a twist on that. It's a Pepsi ad campaign that's based on the question, is Coke or is Pepsi okay? And the answer is, of course, yes, in the campaign.
Yes, it's better than okay. Yeah. And so Pepsi was originally known as Brad's drink. Did you know this? Yes. Caleb Doc Bradham invented it. I mean, this is after Coca-Cola, so Coca-Cola already exists. And he names it Pepsi Cola. Well, the Pepsi Cola, so the cola bit is a direct reference really to Coca-Cola. It's a direct attempt to link it to the supposed health benefits that Coca-Cola has managed to market itself with. But Pepsi, well, okay, so they've never been overt about why they're called Pepsi, but it was supposedly a tonic for digestion, indigestion, dyspepsia. Yeah, exactly. Or you have an enzyme, I think it's in your stomach, called pepsin as well, which is good for digestion. So that is probably where the idea of Pepsi comes from and where it got its name. But all the ones that say hyphen cola like Pepsi Cola did. They are ultimately referring to Coca-Cola when they do that. They're not referring to the cola nut, as they might want to say. It's all a deliberate aim to associate yourself with this phenomenon that is Coca-Cola.
The brands Pepsi and Pepto-Bismol could be said to be etymologically related.
Indeed.
Dr. Pepper, speaking of which, is kind of an interesting one. Is Dr. Pepper as broadly sold where you are?
Yeah, I remember, it feels to me like Dr. Pepper became popular in the late 90s in Britain, but I don't know if that's just because I started to notice it then, or it really did.
It was sold as early as the 1880s, and it preceded the introduction of Coca-Cola by a year, as a matter of fact. It was introduced at the Louisiana Purchase Exposition in 1904 as well, like broadly commercially. The person who created it was also a pharmacist, Charles Alderton, and he first offered it to a store owner who found it to his liking. And at the soda fountain, they started ordering, this was in Waco, Texas. And patrons at the soda fountain began ordering a Waco. And then the guy who was selling this at his soda fountain, Wade Morrison, named it Dr. Pepper. And why exactly he did is unclear. They don't talk about it that much, but I would be willing to bet that it has something to do with like the same notion as Pepsi, and perhaps also like pep as an energetic notion, or something that peps you up.
Yeah, I mean, surely that is also part of the reason why they go with Pepsi as well. They probably think, oh, yeah, it sort of peps you. Yeah.
Another theory says that it was named after Charles T. Pepper of rural Retreat, Virginia, but I'm not clear on why.
If I can just inject some quaint British nostalgia into this, there's a drink that used to be very popular, and you'll occasionally find it now in a fancy cafe that's deliberately playing on the sort of quaint nostalgia of the thing. It's called Dandelion and Burdock.
Yeah.
That tastes very similar to Dr. Pepper, I think.
Oh, I could see that.
But it's named after the two flowers that were originally made to spice it, and it looks a bit like it as well.
It has a very distinctive flavor. It has a competitor called Mr. Pibb, which is owned by a separate company. That was originally called Peppo, but Dr. Pepper sued Coca-Cola for calling that brand Peppo, and they later renamed it Mr. Pibb.
I'd have thought Pepsi would be even more irritated by that. Can they really, between them, not come up with an alternative consonant to P? I mean, just something else. Call it Keko. Sounds great as well.
Oh, speaking of K, we should talk about Kool-Aid, which has all kinds of fun to it. So Kool-Aid is flavored drink mix, right? It's owned by Kraft Heinz. It was originally called Fruit Smack, and it was invented by Edward Perkins, who sold a whole line of door-to-door household products and patent medicines in Hastings, Nebraska. These are all it's funny that these are all medicinal originally. And its predecessor was this liquid concentrate called Fruit Smack, but to reduce the shipping costs and inspired by powdered Jell-O in 1927, Perkins found a way to remove the liquid from Fruit Smack, which left this powder. The powder was named Kool-Aid, and it promised 10 glasses of beverage for 10 cents. We obviously don't advertise it that way anymore because it costs a lot more now. Kool-Aid was sold to General Foods, and the aid bit is kind of neat here. It's probably ultimately from the word lemonade, which hasn't, that's a very old word. It's from French, basically. It's that Latin-derived French ending aid, the same thing, but it's respelled to be AID, right? Because it helps you, it's medicine or something like that. It's interesting, I think, that brands like Minute Maid, I think, that are from the same notion, and it may have been Perkins who started all of this because his door-to-door household products were called Honor Maid, ONOR-MAID, which is a funny spelling of the words honor and maid. And then Kool-Aid is that ending with the goofy spelling of cool.
Funny thing is, we don't have the product Kool-Aid, but we do have the term drink the Kool-Aid with all of the negative connotations that come with it. It's a bit of a, it's a marketing nightmare when you're, when your product is used as part of a mass suicide, I suppose.
It's debatable whether Kool-Aid was involved or not. Now, Kraft Foods is sure that there was no Kool-Aid there, and it was all Flavor Aid, which is owned by a different company. But we also have some video footage of like the supplies at Jonestown, and there were some Kool-Aid packets in there. So
this could be the most controversial thing we've ever reported on, Jess.
I know, right? So we don't know exactly if the people drank Kool-Aid or Flavor Aid or a blend of all of them, but Kraft Foods certainly insists that it was Flavor Aid, not Kool-Aid.
Leave them to argue that one.
I particularly like the Kool-Aid Man, who I think is the most chaotic brand mascot.
Oh, yeah.
There's like property damage left and right. He was the story behind him is actually kind of cute. This was in the 1950s and like the Mad Men era, and an ad agency art director who was probably on Madison Avenue was hired to accompany one of their ad campaigns, and he observed his kid drawing smiley faces on a frosted window, and that's how he created the Pitcher Man with the big smile on the side. And then they added legs a couple decades later, and he started destroying walls. Oh, yeah.
It was safer before he had legs.
Right. He also, did you know that the Kool-Aid Man is technically a Marvel superhero?
Now, what do you mean, technically?
There are 3 issues of The Adventures of Kool-Aid Man that ran under that brand for 3 issues from 1983 to 1985. He also starred in several Archie comics in which he fought the villainous Thirsties, which were a group of anthropomorphic sun-like antagonists.
Surely this is paid promotion, right? This is just clever advertising.
I mean, that was a thing for a while, is anytime there was a cereal mascot or something, they had lore. The Trix Rabbit, the leprechaun for Lucky Charms, things like that. There's a whole theme park not too far from me where the chocolate bars owned by Hershey's are anthropomorphized as much as like Disney characters. You can like hug a chocolate bar.
Is this Hershey World or something like that?
It's called Hershey Park. It's an awesome park, actually. They have some of the best roller coasters I've ever been on, and a huge collection of them. My
cousin went there when we were kids, and I was enormously jealous until I tasted Hershey's chocolate, and then all of a sudden I was not jealous anymore.
That's less the point.
It tastes like vomit. Okay. That might be one of our more controversial statements from this episode.
Right.
It is dire. So while we're still on fizzy drinks, because I want to get onto some more brands that go by different names in the US versus the UK, or than in the UK. And one of the interesting ones is Diet Coke, right? Which in the UK is called Diet Coke now, but was called Coca-Cola Light. And actually in much of Europe is still sold as Coca-Cola Light. It's quite interesting. And it's because the word diet, I think, was basically seen as too clinical.
I mean, they still have Diet Coke here, but they shifted a lot of their marketing over to Coke Zero once they started selling things as zero.
And the problem with Diet Coke is it's got a legacy of advertising directed specifically at women. And that was something that was holding them back. And Coke Zero is clearly quite aggressively advertised towards men as well. So you've got this, manly black branding versus the sort of silvery, shimmery gray of the Diet Coke.
And they've still got both. I think there's something different in the sweeteners too. They taste a little different.
But those are sold differently. Here's one that surprised me. Dannon yogurts. Dannon is spelt differently in America to it's spelt everywhere else.
It has 2 N's here in the middle.
It's Dannon in the US. And in Europe, because it's a French brand, Danone.
Oh.
So, yeah, the reason
I've seen
Danone.
That,
yeah. So here's the deal, right? The reason for this is it's spelled Dannon in the US because they're worried that Americans would mispronounce Dannon, which is the French name for it.
Correct.
Well, they were correct insofar as in Britain it is spelt the same as it is in France, and we pronounce it Danone. So yeah, they're right. English-speaking people will pronounce it wrong unless you change the spelling, unfortunately. But that's just a very subtle change between those two, spelling of Dannon.
The alternative is to bash people over the head with marketing like Nike did.
Yeah, or what we talked about before.
Hyundai.
Yeah, rhymes with Sunday.
Like Sunday.
Yeah. weird because it's a Hyundai. Like everyone says Hyundai in England.
That's very funny.
But
if you said that in the US, people would laugh at you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a preposterous collection of sounds. Hyundai. I mean, it literally sounds like you turned up and expired. Let's get lost in the mess of Mars, Milky Way, Three Musketeers.
Ooh.
You know about how these are different, right? So, okay, I have to get the head around this. What you call a Milky Way in the US is what we call a Mars bar in Britain.
Oh, okay.
Right? So it's got the fondant, the chocolate, but it's also got the caramel. Take the caramel away and you get what we call in England a Milky Way, and what you call in America, or at least the closest thing to it, is a Three Musketeers.
Yes.
Yeah? Am I there?
Yes. Yes.
Do you have Snickers?
Yes.
And what's that?
It's got peanuts in it.
Yeah, it's like a US Milky Way / British Mars, but with peanuts in it. And that used to be sold in England as a marathon. It was a very big deal when they started selling it with the international name Snickers. I don't think Snickers is named after a horse, isn't it? I think Snickers is named after a racehorse. All of these are made by the company Mars, which is kind of Anglo-American. Like its history involves Americans and Brits. So, you know, this is no one's fault that these things are different either side. It's just branding, etc.
Is it meant to evoke the god?
No, it's not. It's the surname. But the fact that it does invoke, the Roman god of war probably doesn't do it any harm, does it? But I didn't realize this, but you have chocolate made by Mars in the States called Dove, and that's called Galaxy in Britain.
Interesting. Galaxy sounds cooler.
But Dove is a brand of soap, you see.
Oh, so, yeah, that makes sense. It is also that here.
Oh, maybe that's not the reason then. I just assumed that was why. It must be a different reason, perhaps.
No, we also have Dove soap, yeah.
What about Axe body spray, the teenage boy's favourite? It's called Lynx in Britain. And Axe spelt with an E at the end of it, which is notable, right? Because you can sometimes spell it without an E.
I associate that primarily with junior high when all of the boys bathed themselves in it.
Yeah, we all did it. We all did it. Just to hide the smell. Just to hide the smell. So you know that this one seems so pointless, but TJ Maxx, as is in the United States, is called TK Maxx in Britain. Because there was already a shop called TJ Hughes, and it seemed like it'd be too confusing.
That seems different.
Yeah, it's different words, different sounds, but yeah, it's called TK Maxx. And I was surprised when I got to America and saw it was TJ.
Did they misspell it?
Is it the same? Of course it's the same.
I do find that like shopping in other countries is a little bit like stepping into an alternate reality. It's like similar but different.
I recognize this, but something's not right about it.
Right.
Well, Jess, I for one am TJ Maxxed out for this episode.
Nicely done. Yes, we've exhausted our time for this branded episode of Words Unravelled, but we'll see you next time and perhaps visit more of these in a future episode.
Take care.